Hello, Rob Lazure here with Dr. Michael Cimino from Woodlands, Texas. Dr. Michael, thank you for being on with us to share your wisdom and your journey of 3D dentistry. You are 16 years as a practicing dentist, 12 of those 16 years in 3D dentistry. So you've got many, many years to share some insights and wisdom, which we're excited to get into today. But maybe just highlight for us as we get started, like, what are some of the mistakes or the stumbling blocks you had in your 3D journey that you're able to kind of figure out and overcome, that you would say, like, yeah, it was really important for me to figure these things out to be successful as a dentist with 3D technology?
Thanks, Rob. I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad that you asked me to share some insight. Just like you said, I've been in dentistry since 2009, graduate of LSU, and moved over here to Texas and started practicing and started a practice almost right out of the chute 2 years in. And I knew that I wanted to be a modern practice, hence the name Modern Smile Center. So
Yeah.
with that, I've got to keep up with the Joneses, and I've got to stick with the technology game here. I Through all of that, I started out using iTero really early on against the wishes of all the advice from the dental lab techs out there.
So that was the one with the foot pedal, the
it,
big heavy one with the foot pedal. Is that the
yeah,
one?
yeah, you had to hold it and stay real still and hit the foot pedal. A lot of times, if we were over the prep or something, I'd have the patient bite down on the scanner tip just to hold it still.
Yeah, there's a whole. Okay, that's a great tip. Love
Yeah.
that.
But thankfully, we moved on from that, and we've got live scanning and that type of thing. But so the challenges, to answer your question, the challenges through all of that was the hurdle of understanding the technology and how to use it properly. You know, you started with iTero and you think you're going to scan and send it to the lab and everything's going to come back perfect and drop in, and the delivery appointments are going to be really smooth. And for the most part, I think they were. However, with every new technology, there's always stumbling blocks and things. And, we're taking PVS impressions and snapping it in 5 minutes. Well, it's taking you like 10 or 15 minutes to get a scan.
Yeah.
But you say to yourself, well, it'll save me time on the delivery. I'll deliver in like 15 minutes rather than 30 or minutes to an hour trying to adjust contacts. So then I moved on from iTero early on to Planmeca's E4D, and that scanner had its challenges. It wasn't going to pick anything up. If there was any bleeding, you weren't going to pick it up. If the margin was subgingival, you weren't going to pick it up. I think that really at that early stage in my career, I wasn't great at managing tissue. I wasn't great at preparing teeth in a time frame that allowed me to be able to get the scan done, go check hygiene,
Right.
and then put it into the mill, get it milled, get it glazed, get it put in the oven, and then come out and deliver it. And those appointments turned into 4 hours. It was exhausting for me and the patient and the staff.
Yeah, tissue management, blood, saliva, tissue management, tissue retraction, exposing the margin. Those are critical steps no matter what you're doing. But I would say that using PVS and pressure material can be helpful in displacing blood, saliva, tissue, maybe capturing a subgingival margin. To an iOS scanner, it's going to take a picture of an existing site, and if there's anything in the way, it's not displacing that, right? So there is a little bit of a learning curve, and I actually think that site management is more important for an iOS workflow than for a PVS workflow. What would be some insights you have for that? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great question because I have some tips that I can offer to the viewers out there. The scanner there has to be a separation of space between either an adjacent tooth or tissue of at least 0.5 millimeter in order for the scanner to pick up a clean edge. And so when you're trying to pick up a margin, and you've got tissue that just ever so slightly is just kissing that margin, or maybe your margin is a little sub-G just because decay led you to have to prep below the gum tissue, it's going to be really hard to see. And if your scanner is not, doesn't show in color, which today most everybody is, but if you're trying to design and you don't have access to color, you can't tell the difference between tooth and tissue. So some of the tricks, of course, I always pack cord. I think everybody here is used to packing cord. But if there's just one area that I can't see very well in the scan, then I'll take a little cotton from the cotton roll, and I'll pull that off very thinly, and then I'll pack that into that area, and I'll leave that for just 30 seconds. And right
So
before
dry
I
it out.
scan, so I'll take my air syringe, dry out my prep, and then right before my assistant hands me the scanner, I'll pull the cotton wedge and then I'll pick it up, because it just displaces that tissue just enough, and then it's going to start to fold back once you take it out, but at least it'll be enough time for me to grab that scanner and scan it right there and pick it up. And I find that's really, really successful, especially distals of second molars, where if the tissue comes up almost to the occlusal surface and you've got to prep that, and you're always going to be sub G, even if you're not below even close to the CEJ on the distal. It's tough. So I call it a little wedge. So I just wedge it, and then I'm able to pick it up. But tissue management has been an issue with a lot of young dentists, and especially I know myself. You're prepping a tooth and then you just can't control the tissue for a number of reasons, not because of any fault of your own. I mean, you may be great at prepping teeth even early in your career, but a lot of these patients have either periodontal disease or they've got active inflammation in the area. You're prepping and just inevitably the tissue's bleeding, so a lot of people are using all the top brands and products on the market. The simplest thing to use is just cotton and hemodent, to be honest with you. I find that that's probably the simplest way to control the tissue. If you've got an area that just won't stop, then just pack that cotton in there, a little cotton ball with some hemodent soak, and just let it sit there for 2 or 3 minutes, and you should be good.
There you go. Cotton ball with hemodent. There's the tip of the day.
It's simple, and it
Save
works.
a lot of stress. That's amazing. I want to back up to, you had an iTero. So you had an iOS scanner, scanning and sending to a lab, and then you made a decision to buy a scanner and a mill. What was the thinking behind that decision at the time? And then talk about your journey, scanning and milling, and how you're utilizing that or maybe not utilizing that. I mean, kind of what's your advice for doctors who have a scanner and maybe they're thinking about whether or not they should add a mill?
Great question. Yeah, my first advice is stand your ground against the salesman out there. In 2014, I'm relatively new practice, excited about technology, and my dental sales rep knew that, and he came in with the milling rep, and he said, I know you, doctor, I know you're seeing patients, but we want to show you this scanner and mill. We think it's going to be great for you and your practice. It's okay. We'll wait. You see your patients. They stayed there all day. I kind of feel like I got pushed into it. I don't think I was financially ready for it. And especially at that time, a whole package like that, a mill, a scanner, the oven, Emax blocks, all that stuff. I mean, we're looking at $136,000. And so he's like, oh, well, you've got a $2,000 payment. How many crowns are you doing a month? You should be able to pay this off easy, So here I am, naive, like, yeah, I'd love to do it. So that's how I got into it. Some of the things that you have to do, I mean, you just jump right in and start scanning and things that I didn't know how to prep fast enough. I didn't know how to manage tissue like we talked about before. Had to scan. I'm trying to design a crown right next to the patient sitting to my left, and I'm getting called in for a hygiene check. It was super stressful, and I felt like I didn't have enough time to deliver quality. And with the expectation of trying to deliver it. And so probably the scariest thing was after I spent all that time designing, milling, if I didn't mark the margins right and I went to go do my try-in and the margins were off, man, that was the most stressful moment, because I couldn't deliver the crown. Like I couldn't do it. So I'd have to just to remill another one, correct the margin or rescan if you needed to. and then redesign, and then to go through all the process of manufacturing the thing and get it ready to deliver. I just had to reschedule the patient when we had to make a chairside temporary. So that was probably the most stressful. And how did I overcome it? Well, I just decided that I just wasn't going to do same day anymore. And that took a lot of weight off of me. And I just started using my mill as an in-office lab. So I would just take my time designing it and then having it ready for a delivery just as if it came from the lab.
So you take a scan, do a temporary, follow that normal protocol, and then send it to the lab, which would be yourself. And then, a couple days, a week later, whatever. I mean, obviously you have the crown there, so you know when to call the patient back in. So you had mentioned you recently decided to not really take advantage of the in-office mill anymore, and now you're just, designing and sending to your lab. So talk to us about that evolution, right? So it was iOS scan only, then scanning and milling. And now what's your workflow today?
Today I use exocad. And
okay.
When I started this journey with exocad, it started well before I even bought the software. So in about 2021, I was talking about exocad. I was doing my own research. I was looking at buying a printer. I was looking at doing exocad, and everybody who I talked to was like, "No, you can't use exocad. You're a dentist. You're not smart enough.
Only for technicians."
It's too big of a software for you. And I said, I don't know if you understand. If you tell me no, I'm going to do it. So I did my research on exocad. I did my research on 3Shape, and I joined a bunch of Facebook groups to see what people were talking about, and I found that exocad usually was the more favorable software. And I reached out to vendors who sold it, and then I ended up getting a printer. At this point, I was still milling final crowns and everything, but I knew I wanted to print. I knew 3D printing was coming. I got a printer, exocad software, and it was such a humongous leap between the E4D software that I was used to. It was like basic. I mean, you could just barely do a single crown, maybe some multiples with it, but it took forever to design. And now exocad, even my first time designing a crown, I think it may have taken me 20 minutes. But of course, I was also just playing around with it, trying to learn the controls. It's really, you have to use both hands. One left hand is using smart keys, the other right hand's, using the mouse. So it's but the software is incredible, and I've done quite a great things with it, but there's so much more that I could be doing with it.
Tell me, when you made the decision between 3Shape and exocad, I worked at 3Shape for many years. I think 3Shape's great software. I also have respect for exocad. They do a lot of great things, so I love them both. However, you made a decision. What were some of the drivers as to why you decided to go with exocad and not 3Shape? Do you remember what that was?
Yes. A lot of the comments on social media were that 3Shape had a lot of bugs in it.
Okay.
And exocad was a lot more user-friendly when it came to that. It didn't have as many bugs. You weren't having as many error messages pop up. So that's inevitably why I decided to go with exocad. And then in talking more with the vendors that sell it, I was asking, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do wax ups? Can I do all-on-4 design? Can I do, veneers on it? Can I do bridges? I want to design bridge work, like a lot of times trying to do just restorative work and then having to make chairside temporaries was the most frustrating thing after you've prepped 8 to 10 teeth, and then one of them involve just something special in there to design. Like I didn't want to have to try to whittle these temporaries off and then risk fracturing them or breaking them. They chip at the margin, and then spending a bunch of time trying to trim them up and make them look pretty or something, or if there's an air bubble that inevitably gets captured in you trying to make the provisionals. I mean, it was so frustrating, and I just wanted to hit a button and print them and not have to worry about it. And exocad delivered. I mean, it's so cool. There's so many ways to do one thing, and everybody has their own workflow. And so if I'm going to be doing a crown work, let's just say 6 through 11, and I know I'm doing full coverage, I can just take their pre-scans prior to the procedure. I can delete the teeth. I can design all new teeth, and then I can keep their pre-op in there too, so I know how much reduction I need in certain areas, or maybe not so much here. And then I'll prep the teeth, and then I'll scan that. I can bring that in, and I just hit copy, and then we just clean things up, and then it's off to the printer. I mean, in a matter of minutes. So, and you're printing a whole set.
You just described a happy workflow, which I for sure want to get into that, meaning, you have this very successful workflow that you enjoy doing. But let's go back to the beginning of exocad. So you chose to use exocad. What was the learning curve like for you? Like, how many weeks or how many months did it take you to get confident and proficient with like crowns or bridges? Like, what were the early indications you did, and how much time did it take you to get to a level where you were confident and proficient? And then what was your design time in those restorations?
I think in the beginning, I was just playing around with the software because I did know the shortcuts or the smart keys and how to use them properly. I mean, I probably played around trying to do one crown. It took me an hour to get to the end, and I probably still wasn't happy with it. Before I took my first exocad full official course, I probably played with the software alone. I did some Zoom training with certain online places, and I got to learn some of the basics, but I took my first hands-on go to the actual course probably about 6 months after having the software. After that, I came back. I designed crown in less than 10 minutes, something more straightforward. Something complicated. Go ahead.
Keep going.
Oh, sorry. Something more complicated, probably spend 30 minutes on it. But I think with my background of using E4D for so long, it really wasn't that much of a learning curve. So for those that are out there using Cerac or using any other software, it's not that huge of a leap. I think that's just different, especially if you're just trying to do some singles or maybe design a bridge or something. It doesn't take much.
So today, how many minutes does it take you to design a single unit?
Anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, it's my workflow. If I prep a crown, I run back to my office, I design it right. Go ahead and mark the margin. Maybe I'll go do a hygiene check. I'll come back, design the crown. And then I send it off to the lab. I just send them my STL file of the crown. No models, no anything. I'm just paying for the crown to be made. Whereas typically the labs are going to charge you to print a model. So I'm just paying for the material itself. That was the other thing too, why I've got away from milling in office, is just having all of the shades available, having to replace the burrs themselves, the maintenance on the machine, having to subscribe to all of these maintenance programs. And then if you had an issue with the machine, getting somebody to actually come out and fix it, it just became all too much. And I thought, if I want 1M1, and I don't want to buy a whole bunch of blocks of 1M1, so.
Yeah.
And plus, I feel like, too, that the Plant Mecca was a 3-axis mill. Everybody's getting 5-axis mills in their office, but you're buying pucks and things like that. So I just assume send it to the lab and have them do all that hard work for you. I mean, that's what they do. They're lab technicians. I just want to have more control over the design. That's what I want. Another key cool feature of exocad is being able to copy someone's tooth. Somebody comes in with a cracked tooth, they're in pain. That may not require a root canal, or maybe it does, but I can scan what's there. Let's just say it was a virgin tooth and no restoration. The anatomy is unique to the patient. I can scan it, and then I can copy it and then just clean up any areas that, maybe it has a rough marginal ridge or something. I mean, we can beautify it, and then boom, I just give them back their tooth. So That's another awesome feature that I use every day.
That's amazing. So when you first started out, it took, maybe an hour to design, then you got it down to 20 minutes. From, like, if a doctor were going to buy exocad today, how long would it take him to reach that proficiency of 5 to 10 minutes per unit? And I heard you saying that some in-person hands-on training or some one-on-one training would be valuable.
That's very, very much so. Yeah, learning the basics of it. There's a lot of courses out there. If you just type in exocad training, there's a lot of that going on now. I know all-on-4 is really hot. Everybody wants to learn the all-on-4 technique to design on exocad. But if you just want straightforward, simple, everyday dentistry where you're doing crowns or multiples or things that to become efficient, probably take you 4 to 6 months trying to learn on your own. If you go take a course, maybe a month or two after doing several of them.
Well, a little plug for Rebel 3D. Daniel Portal is with us, and he does a lot of exocad training. So any doctors want to reach out to him, you just go to rebel3d.com/Daniel. He's a certified level 3 exocad trainer. And I even think you attended one of his lectures.
I did. Yeah, I was going to follow up after that. You said that. I was going to tell you I highly, highly recommend him. I took one of his courses, and he was exocad 101. Yeah, it was a great course. Gave you the basics, the lay of the land, and I came back feeling really good about it.
Awesome. Yeah, Daniel, you can book him for an hour, for 2 hours. If you want him to fly to your clinic and spend a day or two, he's available. So sorry, shameless plug for him because he's really good. All right, so you said you had some stuff you wanted to show us in the exocad software. I would love to see that. Maybe just tell us, like, what are all the types of indications you're now designing in exocad? Like, what are you designing yourself? And then are there certain types of indications that you're just scanning and sending to the lab?
Great question. I mainly got exocad so that I could do all on 4. I mean, I have a surgeon that I work with, and we wanted to move our all-on-4 workflow digital. We weren't doing the caseload that I think could really justify purchasing photogrammetry, cameras, and that type of thing. But we had been using a lab tech that would come on site and do your denture conversions. And it gets really expensive, especially when you're in a market that like Houston that has a lot of all-on-4 centers, and a lot of GPs are getting into doing all-on-4s themselves, all the way down to the surgery, the restorative. So there's a lot of competition out there. And there's a price point that really kind of scares people away. So we wanted to make it affordable, but also keep profit where it needs to be for these type of cases, because they are daunting. I mean, it's not just take the teeth out, throw implants in, make restorative, and then you come back with the final impression. I mean, if an implant fails, you're back in the chair, getting it taken out, replaced, and that type of thing. So I wanted to be able to have more control. I didn't want to have to bring a lab tech in and add that cost to it. And then the final impression, I wanted to be able to have control over the design of the final restoration. Some doctors don't want anything to do with that. I'm just one of those that I feel if I've got more control, then I feel like the outcome we can get there together faster and the patient's happier. So one of the main things I wanted to learn was that I went to a course out in California. I'm sure everybody who listens to podcasts is very familiar with Ryan Dunlop and Full Arch Masters.
Yeah.
And
yeah, they do great work.
I couldn't afford to take his surgical course. His flagship course is what he calls it, but I wanted to learn the design. So he does offer a design course, and I just went there, and I was the only dentist in the room. Everybody else was lab techs. And the course was not just design, it was also how to manufacture the zirconia restoration and how to do the pinking up of everything and staining. But I knew I wasn't going to be doing that. We were going to send that to the lab. So I just wanted to learn how to design and print provisionals. That was the main thing. And so I'm doing that. I'm also doing all my single crowns. I do wax ups for any type of anterior work. When it comes to the final restoration for anteriors and multiples and things like that, I like the lab techs for that. I like the layering techniques. I like all of that. I can't do that myself. And so what I do is a benefit to them is that since I did the provisionals and I did the wax up, I send them all those files. So from the photographs to the files, I send them copies of my provisionals so they know where my incisal edge position is. I find that it's a better way to communicate rather than just sending photographs and telling them to copy it. And then I'm cutting so much time having to send scans to the lab and having to go back and forth with a wax design. I'm doing it all myself, and I find that it cuts time. Now I can schedule the patient tomorrow instead of waiting a couple of weeks to get a wax up back.
That's amazing. What a gift that you're giving to a lab, doing all the thinking and the designing yourself and controlling all those variables, and then they can just focus on, making the out. Do you have anything in exocad that you want to you want to show us? You have a couple cases maybe you could.
I do. I've got a couple of cases that I can share. I've got an all-on-4 double arch case that I designed, and we're in the try-in stages. So I can share that with you.
Wonderful.
I also have, before we've done any surgery on a case, I've got a wax-up case that I designed, so I could talk a little bit about that, and then we could talk about just something as simple as a single crown. All right. Well, what we're looking at here is the actual merged file, and the great thing about exocad is you can make things appear or disappear. So I made the merged files disappear, and what we're looking at are the little titanium tie bases. Now you can make these cases direct to MUA. This particular case, I made them on tie bases.
So you're doing the whole design yourself. You're drawing the finish lines around the implants for the intaglio surface. You're bringing in the library, doing all that. How long does it take you to design a dual arch case like this?
So that's a complicated one to answer. The key in designing these cases is having a good wax up. And because you're going to bring the wax up in and you're basically going to copy your wax up. So really all the work is done ahead of time. I think the challenge with these finals is making sure that everything is aligned as far as the bite is concerned. So let me just go through this with you and tell you how I lined everything up. So these visualization meshes are really the key to everything. So I'm going to turn off the merged. I'm going to turn off the anatomical design, and I'm going to show you how I lined everything up. So right now I'm doing everything with OptiSplit, and
Nice.
I know that OptiSplit is not as great as photogrammetry, but it has worked great in my hands. And for those that are just getting into this, then you can't afford a photogrammetry camera, then OptiSplint is really the way to go. So these are actually the OptiSplint scan bodies, and I'm going to go through these scans here. Okay. So this patient, we're at the final stages of getting a final restoration. So this is actually the printed provisional that she had.
All right, so you're placing implants, doing a printed provisional. Are you converting that on the day of surgery? Are you pre-printing the provisional before implant placement?
No. So the way our workflow works is and let's just say the patient starts with teeth. This was actually a phased situation, but I'll have pre-scans. I'll do the wax up, and I'll talk about a wax up here in a little bit. But then before the teeth come out, we'll put fiduciary markers in. And for the lower, trying to put a fiduciary marker down here in the lower anterior is tough because once you start reducing bone, if you don't put that fiduciary marker low enough, you're going to end up hitting it, and then it'll be completely pointless because you're going to lose it. So a lot of times you'll put them back here in this area or back here, but you really need a tripod of markers to kind of make everything line up. So sometimes if it's feasible, there's a second molar back here. We'll leave that molar in place until I get all my scans in, and that way it can be another way to mesh things up. For this particular example, since the patient we've already gotten past the provisional stage and we're ready to make the final, what I'll do is I will scan the provisionals, and then if there's any particular changes, I'll do a whole new wax up. And then in order to align the bite, I will segment her existing provisional. So that's the beauty of printing, is you can print as many as you want. So I'll print copies and I'll segment them. So let's go see here. Let's turn this off. So here's the segmented provisional. That's the same one as you were looking at before. It's just segmented.
What's the purpose of the segmentation again?
So the purpose of the segmentation is to get the bite lined up, because so this case is unique because we did traditional acrylic on the top, and then on the lower is a printed provisional. And it's segmented because now what I want to do is keep the bite. I want to keep my VDO, but I also need these scan bodies in here to match up with my OptiSplit, and that's going to come in here in a second. But what you're looking at here is the OptiSplit scan, soft tissue scan bodies, and then the segmented provisional.
Nice.
So I've scanned that in, and now what I can do, here's the jaw scan. These are the scan bodies for the titanium ones. So you've got soft tissue plastic ones, and then you've got the actual OptiSplit scan bodies. And so those actually match the surface here. So I'm able to link things up to get the bite lined up. So let me see.
Yeah, you're doing that 3-point alignment to align the surfaces of the scan of the OptiSplint, and then aligning it to the fiduciary markers on the arch.
Correct. Yeah. So you see how that lines up right there. Now, the beauty of taking these scans all back to back is you can, since the soft tissue is there, you can use the palette as a way to kind of match things up, and along with some of the buccal soft tissue. See how this all lines up. Now, I do have also bringing upper and lowers locked in occlusion. That way you can match things up that way. But that's how I do it. And then I'll bring everything in. And then now I've got this, and this marks where those are. So that tells me where the implant positions are.
So then,
go ahead.
So then you get your implant positions, you do your design, you've got your screw access holes and your interfaces, and then you're sending your finished full frame design to your lab as well?
Correct. Yep. So here's the wax up scan. So this is what I had waxed up. Right. You'll notice I over bulked it here. That's on. And then this is the actual merged data. This is the actual STL file that I'm going to send to the lab. So I just take these files, I send to the lab, and I tell them to mill it. This was for a try-in, so I printed this, and it printed out like this. And then I take those tie bases and they snap in here, but I lute them, but they also snap in pretty retentively. And then we'll do a try-in.
What resin are you using currently, and what printer are you using?
So I've been using a Sega's printer. It's a open sourced printer, and
great printer.
I'm using the Rodin Titan for the all-on-4s. I just recently moved over to Sprint Ray, so I'm excited to see what we could do with Sprint Ray as far as that stuff, because I know that's one that a lot of folks out there are using. Just to give you, I know those of you that are watching are probably wondering, what does this look like in the mouth? So we need to share what that looks like in the mouth.
All right, so this is a photo of the final. Is this the provisional or the final case?
That's the provisional.
Amazing. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Nice. So here's a retracted view. Talk us through, what are you checking for in this provisional appointment?
So the main thing is the occlusion. We'll make sure the occlusion's right. You don't want to put these in and then all of a sudden they're contacting on one posterior molar. So that's important. And then how do the teeth fall in the face? One of her main objectives was bringing her front teeth back. She said she felt like Freddie Mercury in the provisional. So she wanted her teeth brought back. She showed me pictures of someone on social media that she follows, that she wanted her canines to be sharp. So all these little things I put into the design. And for this one, I did something new with the gingiva. I used Harvest has a material that's a pink composite for the gingiva. And I got some of that and played with that. And I think it looks better than just painting the gingiva with the OptiGlaze kit, because that's what I've been mainly using. for gingiva is the OptiGlaze, but I really like this Harvest material. It turns out great, and I don't even think that I did a wonderful job with it, but since it was my first time. But
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with Harvest Easy Gum. It's a great product. It's a great product.
It's incredible.
Amazing. So, I mean, having to design all on fours, that's obviously the most complex thing you can design. What do you enjoy now with all on fours? Like, so using exocad, designing your all on fours, if you had to like synthesize it as to what are the driving reasons that you're so happy with your all on four process designing in exocad?
I think it's saving me so much time for the try-ins, because not only do I have more control over things, but taking the records and then sending it to the lab and then having to go back and forth with the lab on changing things, and then the cost of the lab milling it in PMMA or maybe even printing it for you, the cost of tie bases from the lab, and then you come in and try it in, and then the patient's not happy. And then you've got to send it all back and make the changes and then pay again for another print, it's just the cost starts to add up. And if you're doing a couple of those try-ins, maybe 2 or 3, and you're spending, $1,000 a try-in, I think that gets a little steep. I mean, from one particular lab, I did it before I was doing it this way, and it did a try-in, and just to mill a PMMA was over $1,000.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, how can I cut cost on all this? Well, I mean, there's an investment initially, but I use my printer for so many things rather than just all on four. And the great part is I can print multiples. I can come back, tweak the design, and then reprint, and then I can see them a week later. So I'm saving so much time rather than bringing them back 2 weeks later. So this whole all on four final process gets drawn out by months. And that's probably the biggest thing.
So intimate control of the design, speed of provisional iteration, and then cost of provisional iteration if you need to. Or
yeah, I mean, I can tell you just from a cost standpoint, now all I'm paying for is a final restoration. That's it. And in zirconia, mind you, whereas when I was doing things the analog way, I'm paying for a denture. I'm paying for the lab tech to come out and convert. I'm paying for cylinders. I'm paying for anytime it breaks, of course, I'm spending time having to fix it right then and there. Whereas now, if a patient calls and says it's broken, well, I've got another one ready to go. It's like changing a tire. You just take the old one off, put the other one in. And when it comes to the final, now they've worn your provisional design for a while. Now they know what they want to change, and you can make those changes because you have the files. It's just a matter of scanning things and adjusting, and then reprint. And then when they're happy, just send all the files, all the photos to the lab, tell them to mill it, and they just use your design as their wax up, and then they'll go through the process. And then at that point, it's just a matter of what color do you want the gingiva.
I love that. You mentioned you're doing some other indications too with printing. So obviously All-on-X is the most involved and the most complex. What are the other indications that you're designing and printing in your clinic?
Well, aside from just your everyday single crown on a molar, I love doing wax designs, doing printed veneers. That's fun to do. Change somebody's smile in an instant, and mock-ups.
Hold on, let's talk about this. Printed veneers, are you positioning those as like a long-term provisional just to get them dialed into what they want? Or do you think they're good enough for like definitive use? What's your current opinion on that?
Well, I see so many of the technique of them doing injectable composite. You get a design, you get a clear stent. They're injecting composite as a veneer. I've done that technique. I tried it. It's a lot of cleanup. It's just very cumbersome, and you're down there by the gingiva. You're trying to clean things up. There's bleeding. Why not just go ahead, do minimal prep? I know there's no prep, and you're designing. You can print them really thin. The materials out there are getting better and better. I know there's a lot that are just waiting for approval before they go out on the market. Composite is a great restoration in the posterior mouth. I mean, and we're printing things that are so precise, and I'm bonding them on with your cement of choice. I like to use a veneer cement, and I think it's a great long-term restoration. I mean, how many times have we all seen patients come in with composite veneers and they're going strong, you know? So I've done a few cases here recently and the patients have been pretty pleased.
So how long have you had some veneers out in the real world? Like, what's your oldest case you have of printed veneers?
About it's going on a year,
Awesome.
and I haven't had them come back and complain about anything. So
I'd love to see some recall pictures and, 1 year, 2 years in. I know there's a lot of controversy around printing final restorations. Obviously, if you're controlling the design, controlling the printing, it wouldn't be too much hassle for you to replace them if you had to. But that's really, really cool. What's your process for finishing those veneers? What resin are you using? And just for our audience to know, we're not sponsored by any company, not sponsored by exocad, even though exocad, we're not getting any money from any 3D printing companies. We're just trying to share our experiences. So as of today, and maybe this could change if something new comes out, but what resin are you favoring for printing those veneers?
well, with the Sega printer that I have, Pack Dent's Rodin Sculpture 2.0 is what I've been using. Now, as a disclaimer, again, I'm not advocating anybody use anything that I'm saying I'm using, but what I did have a patient come back after I used this particular resin, and she said that her teeth glowed in the dark.
Oh, it's too much UV.
Yeah, and I was unaware of this. And for those that don't want to go as far as porcelain veneer, I can control the cost, the lab cost there, and we can do composite. And I was completely unaware that the resin glowed in the dark. And so she came back, she showed me a picture that the teeth were glowing in the dark. I highly apologized and offered to replace them. And so it's kind of one of those things you figure out as you go. But I was recently on a webinar for Sprint Ray, and I specifically asked that question if their materials glow in the dark before I invested, and they said that their material does not glow in the dark. So that's one thing. You want to make sure that this material, if you're using it, that it doesn't glow in the dark. You don't want a Ross Geller moment like on Friends.
Well, my guess is that had to have been intentional on the manufacturer's part. Don't natural teeth fluoresce a little bit?
These were lit up under a black light. I mean, there was
just
it.
Like
I mean,
Halloween?
we did 8 and 9, and the rest of the teeth were not glowing, and these 2 teeth were lit up. Yeah, it was surprising to me, and the patient was very upset about it, and I understandably so.
Interesting.
If I would have known, I definitely wouldn't have been for it, but
Well, I know just a couple weeks ago, I saw a release that Rodin has released a new veneer resin called Envision, which is a
okay.
resin specific to veneers. I've not spoken to anyone that's tried it. A friend of mine is currently testing with it, but I think this is part of the excitement around 3D dentistry. And maybe it's the excitement and also the stress. As soon as you get a workflow and a product figured out, 3 6 months later, there's a new software update or there's a new resin that got released. And so the pace of innovation is really exciting. And I think it's actually important for us to all keep up to date with the latest and greatest for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up, to be honest with you. These materials, the printers, everything's coming out so fast. By the time you buy something and get comfortable with it, there's something out there that's better. So that's been the struggle in dentistry. They didn't tell me that when I was filling out my application to go to dental school. I thought that everybody had teeth and this was a recession-proof career. But they don't tell you you've got to keep up with all the technology that's going to come out there.
Ton of innovation for sure. So you're designing an exocad, crowns, bridges, veneers, all on X. Are you doing any dentures or night guards and splints?
That's something that I really haven't dove into. To me, night guards, I just send that to the lab and get that back, and it's a quick and easy delivery. I know that Sprint Ray has services where you can just scan and send it to them, and they send you the file and you can print it. That might be something that I do to cut cost on that end. So that's something that now that I have a Sprint Ray, I think I'm going to look more into. So that's coming.
Awesome. So what would you say is next in your 3D journey? Like what technology do you have your eye on, maybe saving up for, or you're, curious about like what's next for you in your 3D journey.
The next thing is face scans. We just got a ray face, and
Nice.
we just
Okay.
did the training this morning, actually, before we got on today, and it's incredible. It really, really is, the 3D face scan. So I'm super pumped about bringing this into the all-on-4 workflow. It's going to change the game. For those that don't have an actual facial scanner or using their CT scans as their scanner, they can do a decent job, but the ray face, it goes back almost to the it goes back almost to the back of the head. I mean, this
Wow.
thing is quite impressive.
That's cool. So the ray face scanner just got that. Use that in your All-on-X. And anything else you got your eye on?
And the Shining 3D, I know that scanner is photogrammetry built into it. That's something that I'd like to invest in, but I think my eyes are on the 3D printing right now. I've getting better at design. Honestly, I'm always looking at exocad courses. They always have them in exotic places that I'd like to go to, so I try to
There
plan
you go.
my exocad course on where I could bring the wife and kind of turn it into a vacation. But yeah, this journey never stops. I'm just one of those that if I'm not learning something new, if I'm not getting better today than I was yesterday, then I'm feeling pretty stagnant. Exciting times are coming, that's for sure, in all this 3D stuff.
This has been a fun conversation. I just have kind of a few questions left. If a dentist out there has had an iOS scanner, let's say for a couple years, and they're ready to take the next step in their journey, and they're interested in getting CAD software and maybe a printer or a mill, like what advice would you give this dentist who's kind of in that phase of getting ready to take the plunge? How would you counsel them as they evaluate whether or not it's a good fit for them?
My first advice would be to do a lot of research before you invest in it. exocad is not a software for the lighthearted. You should ask yourself, have you done any design work? Have you done anything? I mean, you can go take courses and not own the software. The course will provide you with exocad, so you can kind of play with it. They provide computers and the software, so you can kind of get used to it. But you really don't get used to it unless you're playing with it every day. For those that are looking to get into it, honestly, I think that printing is the future. And I know I hear that a lot from other podcasts and such. That's what everyone's saying. I believe it. I think the material's getting better. In order to print something, you've got to have a design. There's a lot of design services out there. So if you're afraid to really dive deep and invest in exocad, then at least maybe have a printer and then use the design services at your disposal, and then slowly creep into doing your own designs if you want to get into exocad. exocad you can do a flex subscription where you pay annually. So you buy the flex subscription, and then annually you just renew it. You'll have access to all the upgrades throughout that year, and that's the best way to do it, rather than trying to buy individual modules and things, because you can break it up. But ultimately, if you bought every module individually at different times, you'll spend way more money than you would if you just bought it as a flex package.
They add up for sure. And we have a number of Rebel agents who are standing by, ready to offer design to those doctors who are interested. Daniel Portal's one, Ben Guilford, and some others. So it is a service we want to offer to dentists in their journey. So we're here to help if you need. Sorry, another plug there for some of the Rebel agents that I'm proud to represent. Michael, so any parting thoughts, right? Any like warnings or word of caution that you would say, hey, if you're not willing to do this and this, maybe don't take the plunge into 3D dentistry.
So many doctors, I think, buy the equipment and it ends up collecting dust, and they sell it. If you're at that stage in your career where you're dissatisfied with what you're getting back from the lab, if you want more control, if you enjoy things like this, CAD work and that type of thing, I highly, highly recommend exocad. If you're one of those that wants to stay in the trenches and you say you don't have time for that, then exocad's probably not what you want to do. You probably want to maybe go for the more slimmed down versions of some of the other CAD softwares that are out there on the market that you can just, basically hit a button and it's almost designed for you. I know AI is really popular, and exocad has a lot of AI built into it.
Yeah.
but I'm one that just wants the control. I guess I'm a control freak when it comes to my dentistry. My best advice is kind of follow your heart, and if you enjoy this kind of stuff, you can't go wrong because it's a labor of love. Dentistry is something I enjoy and I love providing. It gives me great solace to take a patient all the way from the beginning, prepping the tooth, restoring that tooth, and then designing something so specific and custom to them, and then delivering it and it come out great, and know that I had a hand in it all the way instead of just prepping it, forgetting about it, getting a crown back and just gluing it in and sending the patient about their way. I feel like I'm making a real difference, and I've got a hand in it every.
That's awesome. Well, Dr. Michael, thanks for sharing your journey. Love to have a follow-up with you in a few months and just see what you've learned, because we know things are evolving quickly. Love to learn more about the Ray Face and any of the new technology that you start to adopt. So thanks for your time.
Rob, thanks so much. I look forward to a second chat with you. I'll share some facial scans with you and incorporate that and some stuff. So that'll be really neat. And I really appreciate you asking me to be on.
And let's do a veneer post-op. I think that'd be fun, right? Because
yeah,
printing veneers is still a little debated. There's many doing it with success, and I'm glad to hear you're doing it. And I'd love to see some confidence build in the market for that indication.
I'll look into that material you had mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you, Dr. Michael.